All right, we're going to get started here. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of all of us from the Texas Demographic Center, we welcome each of you for joining us in person and online for our annual Demographic Conference. My name is Monica Cruz, and I serve as the State Data Center Lead for the Texas Demographic Center. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Texas Rural Funders and One Star Foundation, two respected organizations doing incredible work supporting the needs of rural communities and nonprofits across the state. They're great partners, and we thank you for making our conference a success. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Texas Demographic Center is the state data center for Texas, and we are a member of the U.S. Census Bureau's State Data Center Network. We function as a focal point for the production, interpretation, and distribution of demographic information for Texas. Our primary function is to produce annual population estimates for the state, counties, and cities in Texas, and biannual population projections through 2060 for the state and counties. Special emphasis is placed on data that may be useful to policymakers at the local, county, and regional levels to assist with planning and the demand for services and resources. We're kicking our conference off with some fascinating speakers this morning. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kara Joyner. As some of you may know, the Texas Demographic Center is housed at the Institute for Demographic and Socioeconomic Research at UT San Antonio, and we also have an office here in Austin. Dr. Joyner was appointed Director of IDSR last fall, and is also a professor in the Department of Sociology and Demography at UTSA. She has served as Editor-in-Chief for Population Research and Policy Review and as President of the Southern Demographic Association. Prior to UTSA, she was a tenured professor at Cornell University and Bowling Green University. We're so glad to have Dr. Joyner leading our efforts at IDSR at UT San Antonio. And so I ask you to help me welcome Dr. Joyner.
Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction. And this morning I was wondering, what year is this in terms of our annual conference? I was expecting to see some number, and do we have a consecutive number or any kind of number? Great. Yeah, and last year it was in Dallas, and then 2 years ago it was in Austin. And I've never been in a state that had something like this, so I think it's really, really special that we do this, because we bring together people from state and local governments, people from nonprofits, researchers, academics, planners, and so it's just great to come together and talk about data and how much we love it. So anyhow, yeah, I'm so excited to get going, and also to introduce Dr. Helen You. She oversees the Texas Demographic Center and produces population estimates, leads the population estimates and projections program, and represents the state demographer in public engagements. She's the senior demographer and lead in developing the population estimates and projections for the state of Texas, counties, and cities. Her expertise spans a wide range of topics, including population projections and estimates, migration, fertility, mortality, health, and healthcare in Texas. Dr. Yu's expertise and excellence are widely recognized in the demographic research community. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Helen You.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Monica. Thank you for Kara for opening the conference. So I'm very pleased to be here today, and it's my honor to be opening this year's conference. with the state of the state. We'll take a look at the Texas demographic trends and characteristics. I hope this presentation provides a shared foundation and knowledge for us for our discussions today of where Texas stands today, what forces have shaped the changes in Texas, and of course, what may stand in the future for communities across Texas. Whenever it comes to Texas, there's a lot to talk about, right? So without further ado, let's get started. So let me start by talking about the latest population trends using the population estimates from the Census Bureau that have just been released. Some of these data just came out last week. Okay. So as of July 2025, Texas had a population of 31.7 million. Compared to the year before, it added about 391,000 people. That's a big number. Although if you have been tracking the trend, you know this kind of a slow year for Texas. The growth rate was 1.2%. But even with that slower growth rate compared to the nation that had a growth rate of 0.5%, we more than double the growth rate of the nation. Okay. And so looking across the nation, the U.S. actually has saw one of its lowest growth point between July 2024 and July 2025. However, all but 5 states have grown, have seen population growth, albeit slower than before. So in the lighter shades are the states that have lost population. But we are on the other end of the spectrum. Texas, in terms of percent change, ranked number 4 among all the states. All the other states, as you can see, cannot be compared to Texas size. So we all deal with numbers, and for a state like Texas to have that high growth rate is just incredible. So although we're slower than before, we're still growing by a lot, especially when compared to other states. In terms of numeric growth, of course, we still rank the first among all the states. All right, so that's outside the state. Across the state, this is the map. Many of you have seen before, or similar map before. It's just the numbers have changed, right? This is the estimated population as of July 2025 for all the counties in Texas. Lots of you are familiar with the map because we know the population is not evenly distributed across the street. Why did I say street? The state. And lots of the population is concentrated in the triangle area formed by Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin-San Antonio, where we're at, and the Houston area. Okay. In fact, if you put them into numbers, have a guess of what I'm going to show. How much percentage of the Texas residents reside on that I-35 corridor counties or east of it? Take a guess. So 87% currently. It was an increase even from 2020. 87% of Texas resident population reside in the counties on that line, I-35 corridor counties, or east of that. So, and all right, and when we look at changes, well, not surprisingly, the changes also concentrated in those areas. You can clearly see this is the percent population change from July 2024 to July 2025. So the growth still concentrated in the triangle, but you kind of can see where the darkest colors are is where the surrounding counties of the major metro counties are, right? So growth have been seen mainly surrounding the central counties of Harris, Bear, Travis, and Dallas, right? And what I want to bring your attention to is not only do we not to only focus on the darkest color, but also the shade around or further away from the metro, further away from the central cities there. We are seeing more expansions that are further away from the center. Okay, and numeric change, of course, the biggest numeric change you can see is, again, in the big counties. This time, all the big counties in the triangle areas show up. We also see growth in the West Texas area, where the Permian Basin is. Okay, but most of the rural counties, on the other hand, are losing population, have been losing, and are losing population. So despite the buzz about Texas growth, we do have another story to tell. More than half of not this time, like 108 counties in Texas, mostly predominantly rural counties in Texas, have lost population between 2024 and 2025. All right, zero in cities and towns. We certainly have lots of them, over 1,200 incorporated places in Texas. And among them, these are showing the ranking of the fastest growing cities with population 20,000 and over. I want to point out, of course, we don't have time to go over 1,200 of them, but this tells a story here by showing you the ranking, especially, again, when you compare to other cities in Texas and also in the country. What you can see is we have 6 cities with the fastest growing cities there on top of the national rank. 6 cities with the most numeric gain, again, in the top 10, among the top 10 national cities with the biggest gain. So again, this speaks to the growth that Texas is seeing, really the hot point of population growth in the nation. And if you take a further look, if you live in the area, there may be cities you don't even know the name because they are newly emerged high-growth cities. But if you live in the area, you probably can recognize all these cities actually are in the triangle areas. So, all right, here are a few maps to show you where these cities are, because not all of us know where every city is, right? A few snapshots just to give you an idea where these fast-growing cities are. And this is the area we're in, Austin-San Antonio area. You can probably recognize the biggest block of colors are Austin and San Antonio. So the fastest-growing cities are not those two big cities. They are on the outer edge of the metro areas. Again, very similarly, when you look at Houston and Dallas-Fort Worth area. Houston is in the center, but the growth really happened surrounding the city and seemingly expanding further away from the city, right? Same thing, lots of growth in Dallas area. And by the way, there are four cities. If you live in the Dallas area, you probably know this. 4 cities among the 10 fastest growing cities in Texas are located in Collin County. So lots of growth everywhere around the Dallas county and city. And by the way, the maps I should point out is the average of the growth or change from 2020 to 2025. We kind of know that the center of Dallas is actually losing population this year. All right. And then we don't want to only focus on the triangle. Let's also take a look at, El Paso area, Panhandle, West Texas, and also the Rio Grande Valley area. So we also see kind of similar patterns. There is growth, but lots of the growth in the suburban city area. But the expansion of that growth is much less than what we have seen in the triangle area. All right. So that's about the population growth. Next, I'm going to talk about the components of change or drivers of growth. Over the recent years, there have been lots of changes and shifts of these components. which is what I'm referring to is the migration and natural change. Lots of shifts since 2020. And the interplay of these components tells a very nuanced story beyond just pure population growth numbers, those headlines about growth, because it has very important implications for everything from planning and policy. So since 2020, and you can see we put the numbers into daily average on top there. You can see that we picked it for daily growth in 2023, 2024, where we had about 1,600 people added to Texas population every day. That's just incredible. The lowest point, of course, was during COVID. But even during COVID, you can see, dive more into the components. Even during COVID, we had very strong domestic migration, which is the orange part. So that made up for the loss or lack of growth in international migration and natural increase. Natural increase, by the way, is birth minus death. However, in the years from 2021 to 2024, what has been driving the growth really is a surge, lots of increase in international migration, which is the green part for the bar chart. Domestic migration has been declining. This is something we're taking notes on, we're monitoring. Seems that domestic migration, which has been supporting lots of the growth in Texas the last decade, seems to be on declining trend. And it dropped to the lowest point the last estimates period. We're closely monitoring this to see if this is a temporary thing or are we seeing a turn of change or a different era. The blue part, on the other hand, is the natural increase. As I mentioned, birth minus death. We're seeing some recovery from COVID where we got to the lowest point, but with more births and fewer deaths after that. We're seeing a bit of recovery, and in fact, with the decline of immigration and migration in the last estimate period, natural increase accounted now for 40% of Texas growth. And we're not seeing that, by the way, in other states in the US. Many states are seeing natural declines now, today. And again, across Texas, how does that look like? This is the net domestic migration, meaning people moving from one county to the other within the United States. You can see the pinkish shade is where counties have lost in net domestic migration. And not surprisingly, you see the gain of net domestic migration in the triangle areas, in the suburban area of the triangle areas, but in the metro areas, actually in West Texas. Don't forget that in West Texas, we are still seeing growth, but mainly focused in the metropolitan area in domestic migration. However, it seems to be a different story in the triangle area. So I often say this is like a two deals of a state, right? In the triangle areas, it's really where probably very notably, you can see the pink color. It's a little hard to see with the label, but you can see the pink colors of the central city counties. So Dallas, Denton, Travis, Harris have lost in terms of domestic migration, and mainly to the counties surrounding them. That's actually what's driving the growth of the surrounding suburban ring counties and exurban counties growth. Okay, so it's very interesting to look at the dynamics beyond just growth, which area is growing, because no county is isolated from others, right? So the other component, natural increase or natural change, we can see that 134, that's more than half of the counties in Texas, was Texas still strong, very strong in natural increase. More than half of the counties have lost on that ground. The natural increase births versus minus deaths, have really occurred more in the triangle areas, the metropolitan areas, and also border counties, where you see a younger population composition and young families settling in, right? And I cannot talk about trends without mentioning this. By now, many of you probably have heard on the news, even if you haven't looked at the data, about the decline of fertility. So this chart shows you the number of children or births to women age 15 to 44 per 1,000 women as the denominator. You can see that decline very clearly. Texas is still among the top fertility state, but even in Texas, we have seen this declining trend of birth rate, fertility rate, since around 2007. Sharp decline, especially among the Hispanics, where this group used to have much higher fertility rate than the other groups. So after COVID, of course, we dropped to the lowest point. After COVID, we saw a tick up, and some people were like, oh, great, we're coming back to our high fertility schedule. Unfortunately, I added the new data, 2023, 2024, it seems that we are back on track on that declining trend. So, okay, and that's probably tells you why we're seeing lots of natural decline in many counties in Texas and across the nation, right? And the reason behind that declined fertility can be really explained by the change in the age distribution of mothers. You can see the decline really occur to women 15 to 29. Of course, we're very happy to see the teenage decline in fertility, teenage fertility decline. But lots of this used to be, the peak age of women's fertility used to be between 20 to 29. But now it's just between 25 to 34. Really a shift or delayed fertility schedule. There you can see. In the new US number, actually the peak has shifted to between 30 to 34. Okay. So far I've been talking about demographics, lots of the trend. In the next section, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and then try to connect those trends we have seen to talking about maybe what are the implications, what do those trends mean for all the other things, important things you're working on. I know that we'll have lots of great conversations on all these topics later by experts who know more about this than me. I'm just trying to connect that demographic trends there and try to underscore the importance of understanding demographic trends in helping inform policy and planning. All right. So we talk a lot about migration, and people often ask us, why do people move? Why do people move to Texas? This chart here partly answers that question, because this is the reason in the survey when they ask why people move. These includes people who move within Texas, right? So, but again, not surprisingly, just from your own experience, the major reason why people move is job and housing and job. And there's research to show that between state movement, usually the main reason is because of job more than housing. But within state, it's more because of housing. And these are big categories, but it's pretty interesting if you dive deeper and look at the detailed reasons. And I found something when I look at that detailed reasons, and I listed the top 3 reasons people responded to. Only between the 2020 and 25. The top 3 reasons, 2 of them have not changed. So people say, I moved because I wanted new or better housing. I'm having a new job or doing job transfer in both years. However, if you look at the other reason, in 2020, people say, oh, I want to establish my own household. But in 2025, that reason it's still there, but it's not the top three anymore. The top three now include cheaper housing. And you will know why when you see this, right? So with the growth, of course, we have lots of opportunities, economic opportunities for us, lots of tax revenues, great, right? But with the growth, we are experiencing, especially for certain areas, lots of areas, the growing pain, and housing is one of it, right? And if you see that, good news is median income, which is the blue line, has been increasing in Texas. However, when you put it side by side with the housing values, which is the indicator of housing prices, you can see the increase of median housing values outpaced the growth of our income. And this has been adjusted for inflation, both of them. And that's why you're seeing people moving out from the central areas and to look for more affordable housing. Okay, and why people's wish list now is to find cheaper, affordable housing. All right, and with people living further away from the center, which is usually the job centers, right? People now have to travel more, and with more people on the road, right? People are spending more time and commuting to work. At the state level, commuting time has increased on average by 1 minute. It doesn't seem to be much, but for certain areas, because this is the state, right? For some areas, especially the darkest color areas, which are also, not surprisingly, the population growth areas, the increase in commuting time have been much bigger than this. So we're basically spending more time on the road complaining or maybe listening to music, right? So that's transportation. And then, of course, we heard lots of news on water shortages, to be exact, I guess. And along with population growth we have different types of water usage. By the way, I borrowed this from the Texas Water Development Board. Thank you very much for that. Just to show, I think municipal water usage is one of the water usage, but is the one that's closely related to residential population, right? Look at the increase in the last few decades, how much it has increased alongside with the population increase, especially in terms of the usage of surface water. Very happy to see they're beginning in 2010. There is a reuse of the water usage there, which helps a little bit. But just imagine the pressure that has been put on that. I think this is where I don't know that much, but we do have experts in the audience from Texas Water Development Board. If you have questions, that's the great thing here. You can go ask them. Okay. And here, I borrowed again the map from them. On the left-hand side is the water usage. This is very cool, I think, a visualization of water usage. The pie charts show you the usage, but also the type of usage. The part I want to talk about, again, is the municipal usage, water usage, which is the red. And I lay it side by side with our population distribution map. Again, look at how similar those are, right? The red colors on your left-hand side, municipal water usage, and then the dark color on my right-hand side, where population is, right? So they are very closely tied to each other. That's another growing pain that we have been experiencing and put lots of pressure on our infrastructure. Okay, now let's move on beyond the population growth. Of course, I talked about fertility decline, which is very much talked about topic. Let's see that impact. So in 2010, this is the population pyramid in 2010. Each bar is an age cohort, starting from at the bottom, the youngest, to the top, right? So it looks like, I was talking to someone who asked me about healthy pyramid. It's hard to see what healthy pyramid is, But it's usually better and easier to plan when you have even cohorts that come in, right? If you look at Texas, that's kind of, each age cohort is about the same size, except for there are a few exceptions, but, so that you can, populations coming in at the same space so that you can plan, or easier to plan. However, moving to 2020, if you look at the bottom, that's the impact of that sharp fertility decline. You can literally see it on the population pyramid at the bottom there, Gen Z and Generation Alpha. Each cohort that came in, new cohort that came in, was smaller than the previous cohort, right? Just imagine what that does to, for example, enrollment, right? We're already beginning to see the signs, the signs of that on our impact on the school enrollment. We heard on the news. I heard on the news. You probably have heard about it too. Like breaking news: school enrollment dropped last year. This is probably, we haven't seen that for many, many years. I don't know whether we have ever seen that, but we haven't seen that drop for many years. This is, again, in the background or context of strong population growth. That's how impactful the birth decline or fertility rate decline is on school enrollment. And you can clearly see this, the growth of, so this is public education growth, and this is 10 years. This is not just last year. In the last 10 years, the growth in school enrollment only happened in higher grades, which are early cohorts, right? I showed you the pyramid. It's the early cohorts where we were still seeing growth by migration and by strong births, right? However, if you look at lower grades, nursery, kindergarten, we're seeing a lack of growth and maybe even a slight decline in some grade levels, okay? So this is public education. I didn't use TEA data for this. This is from the American Community Survey, which also includes the private school enrollment. Another trend we have seen, especially since COVID, is the increase of private school enrollment, especially after nursery. So private school enrollment is pretty high in nursery, preschool, but we're seeing also the growth in other grades too. So much so that the percent of private school share in terms of all enrollment has increased from, I don't know why it's missing, from 9% in 2014 to 11% in 2024. Okay. All right, and we'll probably see that trends, same trends more in the next few years. Okay. All right, alongside with that challenge in, some areas are facing school closing, some areas cannot catch up with the speed of building more classrooms and having more students. This is, different issues for different areas. Alongside with that, no, I moved too fast. We're also facing this. Every time I see this, I really, feel sad, because in lots of the school districts in Texas, 1 in 5 school-age children live in families in poverty. So this is another big challenge we're facing in Texas, right? So numbers do count. We worry about school enrollment, but the quality of children's life also matter, right? And further along, remember that pyramid. Things will go up, right? The new cohort will eventually go up to school age. We've talked about that, and later on to labor force. Begin to participate in labor force. And we are already seeing a kind of slowed down growth in labor force. In Texas, we enjoy the migration, strong migration, and also the strong labor force. But we're already seeing more need for labor force participation from older age, like people stay longer in labor force because of the need, right? We're seeing that the increase, the biggest trend in labor force we have seen is the increase in people in older age labor force participation among population 65 and older. And I expect to see that more in the future, whether you like it or not, if we want to have enough labor force. Right? So, okay, all right, moving on. So we talk about the youngest children. The other thing we keep talking about is aging, right? And with aging, the first thing many people think about is probably health. You know, I'm using one of the many indicators, and I think our keynote speaker later will talk really focus on that topic of aging and more challenges. But I want to use this one to show the disability. So age is the most important predictor of disability. It happens in older age, right? This is also going to be, like other health indicators, a challenge for Texas, right? We all know the fastest growing group is the Hispanics. And look at this chart here. The Hispanics, the disability rate of the Hispanics will increase. Like they're fine, they're about the same level as the non-Hispanic white at the beginning, younger age, but really increased in the future or in older ages. You begin to see that gap later, right? This is one health indicator I want to highlight. I also want to say again, we talk a lot about triangles. Sometimes we miss, talking about the other story. See, even the computer doesn't want to do that. The other story in Texas, which is the rural communities. We know that Texas actually holds the most rural population in the country. And 16% of the population in Texas live in rural Texas. And the challenges that facing those communities are different. We need to recognize are different than the issues we're facing here, maybe, for example, in Austin, Texas, or Dallas. Okay. One of the challenges they face, is, of course, healthcare. Because rural counties and rural communities are also counties that are aging faster than the other counties, right? So, and however, if you look at the distribution of primary care, again, I think the Texas Department of State Health Services, I borrowed their very nice, very good interactive data tool there, where if you go on there, you can, actually look at all kind of care, all types of care. I'm using this primary care to show you the gap there. On one hand, we have an aging population in rural Texas. On the other hand, we don't have enough primary care facilities or services in those areas. These areas are the areas that are lacking that. Okay. This map shows you the ratio of population to primary care physicians, meaning that the higher, actually the worse, right? The higher the worse, right? Because you don't get enough doctors in that sense. So you can see that rural areas and some of the border areas are the areas that have the highest ratios. Okay. All right. Okay, I hope we have more discussions on that later. All right, with that, I'm going to switch to looking at the future, right? Because ultimately, we want to learn from the past and try to inform the future. So as Monica mentioned, one of our major functions at TDC is to do population projections. This one shows you our projections of the latest vintage, which is vintage 2024, all the solid lines. And we also put it in there, our previous vintage projection. And again, if you have been tracking our projections, you'll see that in the last few vintages, we have been adjusting down the trajectory of growth, mainly because of our analysis on the decline of fertility. Fertility decline is driving that kind of adjustment, mainly. So by the current projection, at the mid-migration scenario, Texas is projected to have a population of 42.6 million in 2060. This is lower than we projected, but we do also have a higher and lower migration scenario just to account for the uncertainties. Okay? But none of these projections have accounted for COVID or the recent immigration decline. I just want to. The migration scenario is mainly based on the average migration rates of the last 2 decades. So if you were to evaluate future or want to account that, these trajectories will be even lower than what you're seeing here. Okay, and so in addition to total population, we'll also do population projections by race, age, and sex. And this is a trend we have seen in terms of race ethnic composition. Non-Hispanic white will be the only group, has been and will be the only group that will not see increase in population. All the other groups are expected to increase, and Hispanics will contribute the most in size. The other groups will contribute more in terms of growth rates. Right? So. And age. And I wanted to say that you may have heard about this. The OMB at the federal government level is going to have a revision on race ethnicity definitions. So we're monitoring that, and you will see probably changes in reporting. So we'll provide updates once we hear more. So we'll see maybe differences in race ethnic categories later. But what I do know, something that probably will not likely change, is this. So because this trend is already baked into our population, which is, again, aging. Especially in the next 2 decades, this is pretty much sure that it will see the increase of population 65 and older, the fastest growing group. Luckily, because of strong migration, we're still seeing that our working age population, the composition will stay about the same, the size will increase. The only group that we're not going to see increase is population aged 18 and under. Okay? So this is the trend we're projecting, and I'm pretty sure that this will happen. The question is how much. Okay. And across the state, not surprisingly, this looks very similar to what you have seen earlier. Lots of growth in the triangle areas and metro areas in West Texas, but not so much in rural Texas. To put that down to numbers, the counties that are currently defined as metropolitan statistical area, because you know the definition changes, right? With the current definition, these counties will account for 99% of the growth in Texas in the next 40 years. And the MSAs, just the MSAs, not all East Texas, the MSAs in the triangle areas, the four MSAs, currently accounts for 67% of the population, but will account for 74% of the population in the future. Okay, and this is the percent change. Similarly, but now we see more smaller size or medium-sized counties merging there with green color of growth. And West Texas, if the oil industry does well in the future, we'll also expect to see growth there. Okay, one last map I want to show you, a fun way, or maybe not that fun when you see the results, is this category that the World Bank uses to categorize societies, to look at the composition or percentage of population 65 and older. The societies or counties or countries with a population 65 and older accounting for under 14%, is called aging. They're still young, aging. Between 14 and 21 is aged, and anywhere above 20 is super aged. Every time I say super aged, people are like, what does that mean? Okay. Again, I'm talking about, the society, not individual person. So you're not super aged if you're 65 and older. Japan is in that last category with about 30% of population age 65 and older. Texas, for example, now is still aging. We are almost there, close to 14%, but we're still, young. And if you look at the counties, not surprisingly, the younger and lighter color counties are, mostly where you see population growth, strong migration, right? However, this is the part, probably will, I hope it stays there. Almost all the counties by 2060 will be super aged counties if the current trends continue. And remember that still with migration, strong migration, right? Even with the migration we're seeing, we expect to see that because of the decline in fertility, also the improvement of survivability of older age population. That's why I say whether you like it or not, we probably need more people, older people in the labor force. Okay. All right, with that, I'm going to bring us to the conclusion. I have some summary points there. How am I doing? Okay. So just quickly, the trends we have seen: slower growth nationwide and slower growth for Texas, although we're still growing. Growth concentrated in the suburban and exurban areas of Texas. Rural counties losing population and aging. Domestic migration at its lowest in more than a decade, probably 2 decades. Natural increase now 40% of the growth driver. Fertility rates declining, baby boomers driving rapid aging. So these are the summary of the trends I've talked about. And of course, like I said, population growth, economic growth bring a lot of benefits for us as an individual and as a society, right? Higher tax revenue, more job opportunities, more cultural diversities, lots of these good benefits. But of course, if you can manage the challenges well, right? I mainly focus on challenges, not that I don't love Texas, I love Texas, but we need to manage the challenges well so that we can do well, right? I can continue to be proud of Texas. So the challenges include our pressure on higher housing prices, pressure on our infrastructure, including water, transportation, road, and also housing costs not outpacing income in that sense, and potential declines in school enrollment, and especially public school enrollment. That's probably not potential, but real, or likely. And a potential labor shortage if the current trends continue. You will hear more about this actually in a later section where we talk about labor force projection that TDC has just produced. Okay, and of course the healthcare work shortage, especially in the rural area. Okay, and then with challenges there are also opportunities, right? Like I said, with population growth you can leverage lots of these opportunities if you manage your challenges well. So with that, I wanted to say I hope the data I presented today will help us provide the stage for discussion for our later sessions today, because ultimately the goal of data researchers like you and me is to find the most credible data, do our research, and try to provide the best information to help policy and planning decision. Like the theme of our conference is saying, our hope here for this conference is to bring people places together so that we can realize the most possibilities in the future to make Texas still our pride for people who live here. All right, so with that, I'm going to conclude, but please follow us on social media, get on our website, and get in touch with us. All right, with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen, so much. We actually have a couple of minutes for some questions. So if we have questions from the audience, anybody that would like to ask Helen a question about something that struck you, that you wanted maybe a little bit of a further explanation on, anybody? Yes, right here.
So how come for the graph that showed disability, there's only white and Hispanic? What I was just curious, was there no data on other ethnicities?
That's a very good question. I put those in just to contrast the differences there. There are data on other race ethnicity, although some, I think one of the challenges we face is really small sample sizes, unsteady, estimates. All these numbers I showed you were actually not direct counts, but estimates. So I usually tend to use the largest group just to show and highlight the differences there. We do and can extract data for other race ethnicities. And the other reasons also, Hispanics and non-Hispanic white are the biggest groups in Texas. So, yeah, a very good point. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was wonderful. My question is regarding the data and this analysis you've already put together so well. Is that available on the website for download for us to then marry in with our own data?
Yes,
for further
that's a
analysis?
very good question. So the projections I said were produced by us. The presentations will be available after the conference on our website, right? Yeah, they're already there. Yeah, and lots of the presentations I actually used the Census Bureau's data, which is a great thing because we will have a Census Bureau staff, Nicole, I don't know whether she's in the audience, later today, she'll also showcase you the data sources you can use, and we also have our own staff, Valeria, who will show you how, what data you can find on our website.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks.
Yes, please know that at the Texas Demographic Center, we are always willing and available to work with your organizations, your nonprofits, your organizations, the companies that you work with, to look at some data, help you kind of navigate some of the data sources and see how we can support some of your analysis. We're always happy to support that. So, any other questions from the audience? All right. Well, join me in thanking Helen once again for... Helen will now introduce our next presenter.
All right. So while we try to get everything set up, it's my honor to introduce our next, our keynote speaker, Dr. Jacqueline Angel. She'll present on the topic of aging, dementia, and care gap, how population trends are shaping the demand for care and delivery systems in Texas. With what you have seen on the map, the last map I showed you, I think this is a very timely topic. So I really look forward to the presentation. So Dr. Jacqueline Angel is the Wilbur J. Cohen Professor of Health and Social Policy and Professor of Sociology and Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. She did her postdoctoral training at the Pennsylvania State University program in demography and aging. Her research focuses on aging, disability, and disparities in access, financing, and organization of long-term care. She is a principal investigator on the NIH-NIA Hispanic Established Populations for the Epidemiologic Study of the Elderly. Her forthcoming book, Latino Families in Later Life, a new caregiver paradigm, will be published on June 5th, 2026. I think all of us will rush to the store and buy that book. And I hope Dr. Angel will be open to having a signature on that book. All right, thank you all. Please join me to welcome Dr. Angel. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Monica, for inviting me to be here with you today. I appreciate it. And Helen, your presentation sets the stage that makes my job much easier this morning. My talk today focuses on the consequences of those demographic trends for health and aging, with particular attention to dementia and supportive care. Dementia is usually discussed in clinical or scientific terms, but it also raises profound social and policy challenges. The number of individuals living with dementia is increasing, and so is the number of families affected. Right now, we do not have a cure or effective treatments, nor can we avoid it. This is not for lack of effort. It reflects the complexity of the disease. As everyone knows, the brain is extraordinarily complicated. Treatments have been difficult to develop, expensive to test, and none have worked as hoped. Even delivering therapies, getting them across the blood-brain barrier remains a major scientific challenge. Dementia is also different from many other chronic conditions. It's not something we can easily stabilize or manage over time. There are treatments that can slow progression in the early stages, such as Aricept, but their effects are limited. So yes, there's still much to learn, and I will leave that work to our colleagues in neuroscience and in clinical research. But the reality brings us to the topic of my research and investigation of population aging and policy, building on Helen's work. The increase of dementia, as we're seeing in our population in Texas, how families who are already bearing the responsibility for care today are dealing with it alongside the state, market, and the third sector. This raises the question of who should take care of the elderly living with dementia. As central as family has been to caring for older adults, accounting for about 80% of those in the community, it's been increasingly replaced by the state, a term referred to as defamiliation, as a major source of financial support and medical care for older citizens. In other words, since the family increasingly cannot do it alone and the market is prohibited, there's no other choice but the state. Put in context, dementia is protracted and most expensive for the toll it takes on family caregivers and fiscal strain on the state. Texas Medicaid accounts for approximately 30% of House Bill 1 in our bicameral budget. Here's a survey, a recent poll, that underlines the point of who should take care of older adults. Almost half cited the government, older recipients themselves, in terms of inculcating a taste for self-reliance. Other sources, including family and friends, were also financial options, But the reality is that we will see major expenditures for all sectors. Today, about 400,000 Texans are living with seriously cognitive impairment. Some estimates suggest that it's about the 400,000, it's Alzheimer's, the dementia type, which is the most common. Within just a few years, that will exceed 500,000. The costs are staggering. Families are already absorbing over $20 billion each year. Medicaid adds nearly another $4 billion. But the system depends heavily on families. Nearly 1 million caregivers are providing care, amounting to 1.5 billion hours annually. That unpaid care alone is valued at closely $24 billion. And nationally, Texas is ranking near the top, also in terms of third in the number of dementia cases and second in terms of mortality. These patterns mirror the nation as a whole, as our population ages. These numbers also are large, but what they represent is a system already under pressure. And in this next slide, we see and witness the burden of care is explosive and relentless. So the next question is, who's most likely affected? What these data show from the National Health and Retirement Survey and the sister study, the Mexican Health and Aging Study, which NIH, National Institutes of Health, supports since 1992. It's multiple millions of dollars that has been spent on tracking health and retirement, not only in Mexico, but here in the United States and other parts of the world where we're also seeing dementia. The pattern is quite clear. There are important differences among populations, and as you can see here, there matter for policy, including here in Texas, because that green bar shows very high fraction for Hispanics as compared to non-Hispanic whites. Mexico is in between, but what's important also here to note is that red bar documents cognitive impairment without dementia. So we're seeing the combination of cognitive function as a very important health condition to be aware of in terms of needing services and supports beyond the acute care system. We also see that a higher proportion of older adults, 65 and up, with cognitive impairment and dementia among, again, the U.S. Hispanics. They have the highest level. These differences raise many salient theoretical and practical questions, both for the Mexican origin population, which will be growing rapidly in the near future. Demography is not destiny, but clearly the numbers are very compelling, but also given its high rate of poverty at age 65 and above, and for the nation as a whole. And while Medicare and Social Security have been extremely important entitlement programs, they haven't been able to converge the differences in the level of income. This next slide is important because it shows that it's not just the number of years that we're living, it's the quality of those lives. It is longevity. And we're spending more years with dementia. And for the Latino population, Hispanic population, we'll use our term used by the Census Bureau, those are extremely important parts of what's so unique about the Hispanic population, because our data from Dr. Kyriakos Markides has coined this term called the Hispanic health paradox. That means that older Mexican Americans, older Latinos, outlive all these other racial and ethnic groups despite having low resources and low income. That's a paradox. How could that be? So when we examine these differences, and these are data from the study that I'll be elaborating on, the Hispanic EPIs, we find that in general, that our Mexican Americans are spending far more years with dementia, but that is stratified by not only gender, which is an important variable in all of our demographic analyses, but also by nativity. And our results corroborate other findings that indicate that although Mexican origin individuals live very long lives, many suffer protracted periods of poor health and cognitive functional incapacities. These are some of the first estimates that we have that document the fact that there's no compression of morbidity. And so this reality may mean that morbidity may not be compressed and even potentially protracted. Gender and nativity, as you can see here on the second bar, with our foreign-born women interact, such as life expectancy at age 65 is highest for this group, and they're spending an additional 6.4 years living with dementia after age 65 prior to death. Native-born males have the shortest lifespans and spend the fewest years in an impaired state. And regardless of nativity, Mexican origin men are spending about approximately 1/5 of their remaining years in a seriously cognitive impaired state. For Mexican origin women, over 1/3 of their additional years, you can see here in that second bar, are impaired. So the point here is that there's a lot of variation and heterogeneity in how we age in very late life. And our sample here was in their 80s. And while living lives, longer lives, is a good thing, it's sort of a double-edged sword if we spend a large fraction of those lives needing extra care. And in many cases, dementia requires 24/7 care, and also it matters because often that's unavailable and so there's unmet need. Needless to say, this model shifts the focus from individual risk factors to the broader structure in which dementia and caregiving unfold. And these 4 demographic factors determine and are associated with cognitive impairment, as well as cognitive reserve. Low education, no or inadequate insurance access, which often results in out-of-pocket expenses, a lack of community in neighborhoods where we do not see any type of social integration, and we know that ethnic enclaves has a tremendous protective effect on healthy aging, allowing individuals to grow old in the community and safely. Important work on the important role of neighbors in our lives, written by Marjorie Cantor way back in 1982, but still holds true today. And the 4th factor here is socioeconomic exclusion. The fact that in many cases there's a lack of socioeconomic integration that is really affecting the quality of care, the extent of care, the type of care that one receives. These are all interactive. They're not isolated influences. And this is an important takeaway point, which is they are accumulated over the life course. And they converge at some point when care is needed most. But this is very dynamic. There's a lot of heterogeneity. And to try to document these trends for policy intervention is critical. Why? Because when dementia emerges, families have to step up to the plate even more so as the primary providers of care. They do so under very different conditions. Some have access to resources, flexibility, and support, particularly if they're not in the workforce. Others are operating under financial strain, limited access to services, competing demands, and family dynamics. We tend to over-romanticize family, but in reality, there can be a lot of stress when trying to mobilize family and caregiving. So this, again, produces a lot of variation and unequal access and payment of these services. This is an important analysis that we ran to document where these care is being provided. We use the Kaplan-Meier survival analysis of the probability of remaining in the community. In other words, not entering a nursing home as people grow older. So these survival analysis allows us to estimate the probability of staying alive and the use of community services by race and Hispanic ethnicity. And again, this is using the Health and Retirement Study, which is an excellent cohort study. Pattern's very clear. As you can see here in that top line, Hispanics are significantly more likely to remain in the community compared to both non-Hispanic whites and African Americans. That means they're less likely to use nursing homes, even at older ages when they are highly impaired. Now we assume, given the paradox, that this reflects better health. But when we account for both health as well as physical and cognitive disability, that difference actually becomes even larger. Hispanics are still far less likely to use nursing homes. And when we add in socioeconomic factors, that gap increases to the point where Hispanics are 60% less likely to use nursing homes compared to non-Hispanic whites. Many factors account for this, and we can discuss that during our Q&A. So now I'd like to turn to providing a thumbnail sketch of highlights on dementia and dementia caregiving. And this is from the largest health study of Mexican Americans in the southwestern United States. That includes California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas. Title of the survey, this is a longitudinal cohort study, is the Hispanic Established Populations for the Epidemiologic Study of the Elderly, funded in 1992 by National Institute on Aging, where we had 3,050 subjects in our cohort, 65 and older. In 1993, fortunately, we were able to add, with a competing renewal, 902 subjects to replenish the cohort at age 75, which was the same age as our baseline cohort at wave 5. And then at wave 7 in 2010, we also have the opportunity to explore what we could learn about caregivers and the care recipients. There is a caregiver crisis in the United States. Because of these demographic trends, we have more older adults needing care relative to the number of the young. Of course, child care is still extremely important and necessary. However, these data would give us an opportunity to be able to document some of that heterogeneity in differences, and not only in terms of morbidity among the care recipient, but in this dyad, the toll that it might be taking on caregivers. And we were, fortunately, with the Hispanic EPIs, and that's the acronym, we're able to document those points because we had a rich set of variables on health, self-assessed health indicators, chronic conditions, but also we had objective measures of performance-oriented mobility assessments so that we could contrast those subjective assessments with these objective measures of being able, of mobility, not only physical mobility, but also other dimensions of that as well. Dementia has many different ways of defining what it means. But when we want to use statistics, it's important to understand what that measure is in terms of operationalization. And in the Hispanic EPIs, MMSE is not a test for clinical diagnosis. It's a screening instrument and used for research purposes. It differentiates between those who are highly functioning compared to those who are poorly functioning. So as we use this measure for the analyses that will follow, that those who are reporting MMSE scores of 18 and under are just part of our algorithm. We also examine and incorporate into our algorithm the extent to which they perform or able to instrumental activities of daily living. To what extent would they need assistance with preparing a meal, getting transportation? And these are important indicators of those who we define as having likely dementia. Again, this is not a clinical study, but also we have caregivers who are proxies in the survey who also were able to respond by saying that their care recipient had Alzheimer's disease that was diagnosed. And the proxy are far more dependent. Yeah. Living arrangements are vital for living with dementia in the community. And the Hispanic EPIs has outstanding data on living arrangements that can also be matched with the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey. But just to go over this and to make these points clear, in 2010, nearly 1/3, about 30%, that first bar, of adults over age 80 were living alone, while another 37% live with others, typically adult children, extended family members, or other relatives. Only 19% lived exclusively with a spouse, and remarkably, less than 2%, roughly speaking, were in nursing homes These findings challenge conventional assumptions that institutional care is the dominant pathway for very old adults with increasing disability or cognitive impairment. Memory care, for example. Among older Mexican Americans, aging and dementia care remain deeply embedded within family and community networks. Families continue to function as the primary long-term care provider. At advanced stages, when risks of frailty, cognitive decline, and caregiving demands intensify. So for dementia specifically, these living arrangements carry both protective and vulnerable dimensions. At the same time, the caregiving often occurs in the context of financial strain, crowded housing, we witnessed that during COVID, limited formal services, and unequal access to dementia diagnosis and treatment. And there's a lot of variability across our state in that. Older adults living alone represent a particularly high risk group because cognitive decline may go undetected until a crisis emerges. We were surprised to see that as such a large percentage. And social isolation, Medicaid mismanagement, falls, and unmet care needs become increasingly likely in the absence of sustained supportive networks, and we are also witnessing an increase in kinless households without any support available. And the role of the third sector and nonprofit organizations fills that gap. So the exceptionally low rate of nursing home residents also reflects these broader structural realities. These data from the Hispanic EPIs illustrates the major shift in the living arrangements of older Mexican Americans almost over a 15-year period from wave 1 to wave 7. And the big point here is in that yellow bar. At wave 1, you see it's 46%, and that jumps to 51%. It shows growing dependency on household extension, or multi-generational households, because we know in the Hispanic family, they're far more larger households than other groups in later life. Living with a spouse only declined substantially from 33% to 19%. This reflects widowhood, major life events, decline, caregiving needs, and changes in marital status with advanced age. The percentage living alone, and that's the green bar, included a large fraction of those with dementia, increasing from 21% to 31%. This indicates a parallel rise in these sources of social vulnerability and potential risks for social isolation. And some of you may recall that the former Surgeon General of the United States had declared a loneliness epidemic in the United States, not just for older adults, but for young as well. And living arrangements plays a very large role in that. It's not just social isolation, which is a structural variable, it's also the assessments by the respondent. We also know this is a Sullivan model life expectancy table, shows that dementia predicts transitions to living with others. You know, what happens essentially when individuals develop dementia and what factors are affecting these transitions. And in a nutshell, dementia increases the likelihood of moving in with others. And Helen, you can click that on to show 70%, that's right. And it also increases in the second half of the multinomial logistic regression, the increase in mortality. This represents a social turning point. It's not just medical, okay, that is driving these transitions and living arrangements. And the extent of caregiving responsibility accompanies these transitions. And in many cases, they are increased as well. In terms of this greater dependence, what comes with that is a need for support in basic activities of daily living, such as bathing, dressing, grooming, being able to have someone provide you with toileting. Those basic activities of daily living combined with instrumental activities of daily living are critical for being able to stay in the community. If we want to design cities for the future, we want to take those into consideration. The probability of transitioning from living to alone to living with others, I wanted to share this with you by gender and dementia status. And what we have here, and this is at ages 80 and 90, as Helen had pointed out, the population is the most rapidly segment of that is over age 80. And what we see here is women with dementia have by far the highest probability of moving into shared living arrangements. Their likelihood rises largely with age, increasing from about 7% at age 80 to nearly 30% by age 90. That's the top trend line there in terms of our analysis. And the men without dementia also experience increasing transitions to co-residence, but it's far less substantial. It's reaching only about 19% by age 90. Men with dementia and women without dementia show the lowest probabilities overall, with more gradual increases across age. So gender plays a very important role, as well as the dementia status. This all adds up to caregiver intensity and complexity and how this falls on one primary caregiver. Contrary to popular belief, our data reveal that while we have very large households and family sizes, mobilizing families at a time when care is needed most is very challenging. And so as a result, caregiving tends to be more intense for Mexican American caregivers of those who have often not as much support as they need. A lot of heterogeneity, again, in the types of caregiving arrangements. In this table, we can see that dementia care and daily personal care is far more common among Mexican American caregivers, and the only opposite trend is for living together for non-Latino white caregivers, and this is mostly due to a larger percent of spousal caregivers in the National Survey of Caregivers, which is the subset for the National Health and Aging Trends Study, which we paired with Hispanic EPIs because they did not have a sufficient number of Hispanics, nor Mexican Americans, which account for the largest fraction of our Latinos population. The use of formal services for the oldest Mexican Americans varies by dual eligibility. What is dual eligibility? This is driving the participation in transportation, but adult day centers. And let me just briefly say that the participation in both the Medicare and Medicaid program, which is a dual eligible participant, is extremely important to understand because this group is the sickest, the frailest, and the most costliest, all right? Not just for the state, but also for the federal government, and can take a toll not just opportunity costs for caregivers, but also in terms of financial responsibility. This is an alternative to nursing home care or adult day programs. That's the second set of charts that you see here. And dual eligibles, again, they're the dark brown, should I say, burnt orange color. They are the ones who are driving this use of formal aging services among oldest Mexican Americans. And it highlights, again, the public role of our entitlement programs. I want to end on some very positive news in terms of what Texas is doing now. First of all, they recognize these trends, all right? And there was a state amendment addressing rising rates through dementia prevention research, and it's referred to as the DPRIT. And to be clear here, the state will be providing $3 billion investment through this Dementia Prevention and Research Institute of Texas, DPRIT, for research, innovation, and early detection. This is not an incremental change. It is a structural investment in the future of brain health and also how families and others will be affected by this. And you can see from our Alzheimer's dementia in Texas, that regional variation. And along the border, in many cases, there's extreme poverty. So this will be very important for us to have these dollars allocated, in addition to having the adult daycare centers, which we also see as well. At the same time, Texas is advancing a coordinated multi-sectoral approach, recognizing that we need everyone coming to the pool to be able to make our infrastructure strong and strengthening it. We already are making investments in dementia care and aging services and planning through our statewide 5-year strategic plan, which is aligning this with these demographic trends. And this 5-year strategic plan is available online at this link that you see there. And just to be clear, it's the Texas Statewide Interagency Services Coordination Council. I'm not speaking on their behalf. They are the organization that was part of our infrastructure here in Texas and the governor's office to make sure that all the data are available. And then finally, let me just wrap this up, that we have a really cool, promising approach through intergenerational day centers. And as we see here, they operationalize at the community level, and they're bringing young adults, older adults, caregivers, and children together in shared spaces while providing the care that both the care recipient as well as the caregiver needs. And one example is at Texas A&M University, where you actually can see intergenerational programs bringing all of these generations together in shared settings, and they provide much support, not just for cognitive engagement, but also for early learning as well. And they improve and reduce social isolation. So multiple benefits and a tremendous opportunity. And lots of my colleagues to thank for this work that's been happening over the last 3 decades. I want to thank you for participating in this session. Look forward to some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Angel. Dr. Angel is a very well-respected scholar in this area of aging and serves on multiple boards and/or commissions and provides a lot of technical expertise. Of course, her research focuses on one of the fastest growing populations in Texas, which is the Hispanic population, Mexican-American population. But of course, the issues that she highlighted this morning are, across the board in all our families, in all our family structures, how we see even in our own families, aging challenges and challenges for care in our communities. So right now, we'd like to open it up to any questions here in the audience. Yes.
Hello, thank you so much. That was wonderful. There was a recent study done by sort of a tech company and organizational development company, Motif and Human Change. It was called The Geography of Prosperity. It made a big splash in San Antonio because they created what's called a prosperity index for all the cities, and San Antonio ranked really low. They used 5 metrics, one of them being AI automation and climate resilience, and one of the metrics for predicting future prosperity in populations was social cohesion. So of all the 5 metrics, that was one of the metrics. So the study results are skeptical because it's, a company that's, not scientifically backed. But I found that really interesting that it was in the geography of prosperity, one of 5 metrics indicating future prosperity in cities. Can you comment a little bit about the research on social cohesion in Alzheimer's from an epidemiological point of view, and what are good metrics of social cohesion that really predict Alzheimer's and dementia and future prosperity for that matter?
Wow, that's really so important, social cohesion. The lack of social cohesion is associated with premature mortality, right? That's sort of a stunning fact that dates back to Emil Durkheim many, many years ago, all right? And the reason why that's important is because social engagement allows us to not only strengthen our neurological capacity, but also has a practical element, which is it's reducing social isolation, meaning that you'll have others to be able to engage with, communicate with. And those daily interactions for someone who is experiencing declining cognitive capacity, as well as the ability to reach out and get the kinds of services and supports they need in the absence of family, it's critical. So who is in those networks to make sure that social cohesion is coming, right? And how heterogeneous is that network? Very important social network analysis that takes place in sociology discipline and others in public health, because it correlated with not only the wealth for caregivers who need to ensure that their loved one, the care recipient, is being taken care of, but through IDCs, adult daycare, as well as those experiencing the midlife cycle squeeze, where they have the young that they're taking care of, as well as older adults. And in many cases, because of serial monogamy, another trend, there are multiple sets of parents that have to be taken care of, and sets of children. So we have a lot of blended families out there too, which adds to the complexity of dealing with the response. And often it's not timely. And we assume, again, that everybody is just going to jump on board, and the research is not necessarily that clear. Lots more to take place. That's really a terrific question, and something, and as a society, we need to focus on. Yeah? We need to bring generations together, not tear them apart.
Thank you, Dr. Angel. We have actually a question from one of our online viewers.
Oh.
Hi, we have a question from Evelio Salinas. It's a long question. How do we tailor and segment healthcare systems to meet the need and earlier preventive health approach? Evelio said we created a 50+ medical care management for older adults, HIV, Ryan White service category. If we do increase screenings, it could also stress the thin workforce and capacity shortage, expertise, etc. How can we improve that market demand?
So how do we improve the market demand for early screening of dementia?
Kind of hard.
One thing we do need to understand, given that there is no cure for dementia, that our response is extremely important. And at early stages, keeping in mind that we do not have the extent to which we're trying to have these adequate treatments, and there's others, as you could see with regard to the acute care data along the border and other pockets of the rural areas where geriatric primary care providers are just not available, nor are geriatric psychiatrists. In El Paso, if you need a geriatric psychiatrist, you need to go to San Antonio to get that care, okay? So this is part of it in terms of prevention, and DPRIT, this new investment by the state, $3 billion, will also be able to begin to get a better handle on that. Keeping in mind that the pathway into this system is very much tied to the primary caregiver, family household, living arrangements, that community, neighborhood, extremely important. Who is checking on your neighbors every day to make sure if they're experiencing cognitive decline? Who's doing that? I have a neighbor now, actually, is in that boat. And so it requires checking, even though she's married, right? Because her husband has challenges. Well, you know.
Any other questions from the audience on this issue? Yes.
One more question, go ahead.
I'm curious about like the percentage of caregivers who are just dropping out of the labor force, or if they're just maintaining part-time jobs, and just kind of if you track what kind of occupations for those that are dropping out.
I have a slide on that, and the transition from the labor force to the home is a very high percentage. I can get those data, exact data for you. But also another important piece of this coming from the Hispanic EPIs is that, and we were surprised about this, the number of grandchildren taking care of their parents. And what we learned is that
Taking care of their grandparents?
yes, taking care of the grandparents, and what we learned from that is it's a far more unstable role that they're engaging in. Why? Because there's competing life events. In addition to providing 24/7 care, they need to go to school. They need to get to work. They need to be maybe transitioning to a partnership in a co-residential situation, or getting married, tying the knot, and other obligations, right, early in life. This is a very age-graded role. In our Hispanic EPIs, our average age was, roughly speaking, 50 years old. But this emerging role of the young, there was a major article, for those of you who are interested, published in the Demography, which is the Population Association of America primary journal, that you might want to take a look at, because it was using Census Bureau data. Great question.
All right. Well, join me in thanking Dr. Angel for her time, and Helen, Dr. You, Thank you all so much. Thanks to all who joined us online. We're going to be transitioning here. Those of you joining online, we're going to have another session live at the plenary at 1:15. And those of us who are here, we're going to have a little bit of a break, and we'll be transitioning to our 11 a.m. sessions. So thank you, everyone.